Okay, welcome everybody. So we have the first of 2 nights of Certificate of Excellence and Diploma of Distinction presentations. This represents either a year-long or 2-year-long commitment of a student's passion or interest. This is our 3rd year doing this program, and I'm happy to say we continue to grow. We've had 2 people in our inaugural presentation, 6 last year and 8 this year. And some of you, as I see in the crowd, are already enrolled in the program, and some of you are thinking about it. But this is one of my favorite events of many excellent events because you really get to see, in terms of artistic talent, intellectual curiosity, and service, what some of our extraordinary young people are doing. So we're going to have 3 presentations, and at the end of those, I'll ask the presenters to sort of form a little panel, and we can have a discussion and Q&A session. We won't do questions in between the presentations. If you have to go for whatever reason, you are perfectly free to leave at any time. Okay, our final presenter for this evening's round, and again, I'll remind everyone that we do have a whole nother evening of excitement tomorrow, same place, same time. But our next presenter is, thank goodness, telling us that she wants to be a teacher vocationally because she's already an extraordinary teacher, a very, very gifted teacher even at this young age. But we are very, very fortunate as an English department to have a young literary enthusiast who is very interested in getting some honest data about how literature reading works at Ilmed Prep, and thinking about how to shake up reading education, how to shake up the teaching of literature, what new strategies might be explored. She has been a cadet teacher for us here at Prep for a while, and she's going to present to us her findings on rethinking reading. So the brilliant and amazingly talented Kacy Jones.
The last few years studying English classes in an attempt to find inspiration for when I am an English teacher myself. I thought this research would be an easy way to get the experience I wanted. I thought I would leave at the end of my junior year saying, "This is what teaching is like. I cannot wait to do this." Here's a quote from my cadet teaching journal. Day 10. Maybe I don't want to do this for a living. So it wasn't all confirmations that teaching is my life's calling. I found myself writing, "Get phones out of the classroom," more times than I could possibly count, and lamenting the lack of care I saw in every classroom. But the true reason I started to debate my love for teaching was because it seemed like no one around me was ever reading. According to the National Center for Education Statistics and the National Assessment of Educational Progress, 4th grade reading scores have stayed basically the same for years. 8th grade reading scores have been on the rise, but 12th grade reading scores have declined. From 1992 to 2005, 12th grade reading scores measuring reading proficiency dropped 6 points. This graph shows what percent of high school seniors in 2005 met the ACT's college readiness benchmark for reading. In 2005, only 51% of students were ready for first-year college-level reading by the ACT scale. This graph also breaks it down further, showing how males were less prepared than females, as well as those with lower incomes and those of different races. According to ACT's data, these students are well on their way to being prepared for college until 10th grade, when there's a sudden drop in preparedness. Let's see how Prep fits in with this data. Last year, I sent out a survey to the kids of the world literature class I was a cadet teacher for. Since that gave me a good understanding of which books those students had read, I tried it with the whole upper school. This year, I received 44 responses, responses from every English class we offer except for English as a second language classes. So here we have a graph that shows 27 of the 44 kids who responded actually read for fun. Although these students claim they read for fun, I did say in the question that they don't have to read for fun regularly. So if they just do it during the summer or when they have time, when they don't have schoolwork, that's fine. I do trust this graph, in case you're wondering. Sometimes these kids gave some troubling answers to what they happen to read, so I do think they're telling the truth. And I did sample people from both sides of the spectrum and tried not to just simply survey my friends who I know read all the time. A report from 2012 by Renaissance Learning Incorporated found that the novels students read in their free time are typically for students that have 4th or 5th grade reading levels, such as The Hunger Games, Harry Potter, and Nicholas Sparks novels. Personally, I just think it's good that children are reading, no matter what they're reading, but perhaps the books marketed for students today make them unprepared for the books we teach them in high school. Many students don't have the time or the willpower to get through every one of their assigned reading novels, so they read in parts. This is a graph I made based on my survey data, which shows how many assigned reading books the students read fully on the x-axis, and how many assigned books they didn't read at all. They didn't even read parts of it on the y-axis. And the size of the diamond means that there were more kids that had the same data. So, for example, one student read 5 of the books they were assigned fully, but one of them they didn't pick up at all. And 5 students read 4 of their books fully and read the others in parts. 3 students read none of the works fully, but also didn't read everything in parts. So they might not have finished a work, but they also didn't completely ignore a work. So 27 of those who responded to the survey read all of their books in parts or in whole, and then 17 students did not read at least one novel. So what do they do if they don't read? Well, it appears most of them use things like SparkNotes. I will say that SparkNotes is an invaluable tool that I use quite often, especially with older works where I'm pretty sure I understood the chapter, but I'm not quite sure, so I just want to check to make sure. But really, the problem is that they begin to rely solely on SparkNotes. They're more likely to skim a SparkNotes page than skim a chapter before a quiz, which goes to show teachers that sometimes reading quizzes don't work to make children actually read the book. But don't despair. Quizzes aren't working for English, but apparently they aren't working for history classes either. So here we see that a majority of students read rarely, but also some of them do read a majority of the time. So I also did it for science class just to make sure. Results are about the same, although it does appear that people tend to read more for science than they do for history. So if we can't use quizzes, what can we do? Well, one thing that I hear over and over again is discussion. Earlier I mentioned how reading scores tend to drop after the 10th grade. Well, before 10th grade, teachers continually check up on reading progress with things like graded discussions, seminars, roundtables. Children want to be heard. They want what they do for homework to matter towards their grade and not just enrich their mind, which is a problem for another time. However, and I can speak from experience, structured discussion doesn't work. Asking one question about a specific moment in the text will not get many people to respond because the students think you're looking for a specific answer. They don't want to seem dumb. So what you should do is have a discussion where they're allowed to start off with any question about the text, any comment whatsoever about the text. I've seen that start countless conversations. And teachers, if you're worried this will not create an atmosphere where the students are looking at the work critically, then you can grade each student during the discussion. Tell them they have to use 1 question, 3 quotations, 2 critical thoughts, 1 connection to another work, etc. I think that eventually enough of these discussions will create a relationship where the class feels they can say anything and start discussions even when it's not being graded. Graded discussions with textual support are also much harder to ace using only Spark Notes. That being said, even students who don't read still get their stories somehow. Half of those I surveyed said they used to or still do read comic books. Perhaps adding some graphic novels to the curriculum isn't a bad idea. While Persepolis may not be the most liked book, almost every single world literature student reads it. Apparently students at Prep love theater. The Color Purple was cited as a favorite by many of those that I surveyed, and I do think it is in part to us going to see the musical at the Arts Center. Kids need to see that literature exists outside of the classroom, that there's a point to it, not just taught in English classes. Also, reading plays in class ensures that everyone reads the work, and reading things out loud, I think, helps add a human connection to works that sometimes people feel they can't relate to. Unfortunately, poetry, not a huge favorite of those at Prep. While I understand the AP exam typically throws archaic, harder to understand poems at children, I do think modern poetry should be added to the curriculum wherever possible. Even if hearing a spoken word piece by Sarah Kay doesn't help the students for their exam, students need to know that there are different types of poetry out there. For a generation raised on YouTube, button poetry is a surefire way to get them thinking about something. I absolutely hate it when someone says they hate poetry, because there's so much of it. How can you hate all of it? Students shouldn't be forced to just read Robert Frost and Walt Whitman when they can instead recite song lyrics or write blank verse poetry or even listen to a Bo Burnham special. Some kids wrote on my survey that they want current and relatable works. Maybe this is how we can reach them. I will say, we are reaching them through certain novels already. Frankenstein and Hamlet were both cited as favorite works by multiple people. For Frankenstein, us AP Lit students were able to have a free-form discussion like I was talking about earlier, which I believe aided our understanding. For Hamlet, we all read the work out loud and watched several movie clips as well as the full Mel Gibson version. We attacked that play from all angles and left with a deeper appreciation for what Shakespeare did. We also did a creative project and were not solely expected to write an essay, which allowed us to have fun with the play and its subject matter. 1984 and The Color Purple, both relatable novels to this day and age, and are taught like relatable and current novels. Plus, students watched the movie version of 1984 and the musical for The Color Purple. So if they hadn't read the books, they at least got to experience the story, but hopefully they did read. Persepolis, a graphic novel which was not as frequently mentioned, but it is widely read because it's so accessible. Slaughterhouse-Five, a book that's still a classic, but a little more off the beaten path for school literature. Personally, I've never read The Devil in the White City or The Secret History, but there's a recent fascination with stories about murder, and as far as The Secret History goes, one of the students who wrote that they enjoyed it said, "The Secret History is amazing, Donna Tartt is epic." So I suppose authors who are epic is a plus for students. In all seriousness, another thing I saw in the responses over and over again is they all loved the books they were able to choose themselves. Give students a list of appropriate books to pick from, and I guarantee most of them will enjoy it. However, there has to be an activity involved with the book. You cannot simply force students to read a book you know they will enjoy. Even if they know they will enjoy it, some of them will probably rebel because you are dealing with teenagers after all. If there's a way to ensure at least 2 people picked the same book and could then have guided discussions about the works, enjoyment and analysis could go hand in hand. I'm also a big fan of creative projects. I'm sure the students would not mind if they were given the choice between a creative project and an essay, or even if they had to do both a creative project and an essay. I'm personally a fan of the Make a Book Trailer project, or the 3 main characters are on a dating game show, what happens project. These allow the students to dive deeper into specific aspects of the book, and might just make them analyze a little further and try a little harder than they would if they had to write an essay. It pretty much ensures the students read their selected book as well. If you're still worried they aren't reading, independent reading time in class, no phones or computers allowed, designed for them to read the book they chose for their project, or even any other novel, play, newspaper, comic book, anything as long as they're reading could boost the amount of time they spend reading a week. If possible, bring books to their level. Convince them that what they're reading matters to them. In AP Lit last week, we made lists of what was in our backpacks and pretended we would have to go to Vietnam carrying these items as a precursor to the book The Things They Carried, about men fighting in Vietnam. It definitely put us in the right mindset and got us more interested to read the book. Students are no longer responding to typical tactics, so maybe it's time to start going as out of the box as we can. Although I expressed my doubts in my cadet teaching journal, I do still want to be a teacher, and actually, trying to solve this problem has made me want to be a teacher even more. All hope is not lost. There are plenty of students here who do read. Now let's find a way to connect to more. Thank you.